Hi there, Owls. Welcome to week 8 of ECT English for Owls. I'm Dr. Anderson, and this week we're going to be focusing on those time management strategies. Now, if you think back to the practice test you took a few weeks ago during that half day of school, you probably are one of hundreds of students who struggled with making it to the end of the test with enough time to spare or no time to spare at all. And in fact, if you look at how you did and you're able to access your answers, you probably are like many students where the top half of the answers you're missing a few, but not nearly as many as you miss when you get near the end of the test. So today we're going to look at some time management strategies. All right. Our goal today is to first review your practice test experience. Second, look at 10 time management strategies. And then finally, we'll get ready for our next week. So let's take a look at your test. Think back to that English test, and it might also be true for your reading, math, and science test. Did you run out of time? Which of the 4 sections do you think were most difficult? You know, for that English test, 75 questions in 40 minutes is a lot of thinking to do. And we aren't surprised that the first several times you take that test, you get kind of bogged down, especially about halfway through. And by the end of the test, you are done. So we've got to come up with some strategies to keep you going the entire time. But which of these sentences sounds familiar? I spent too long on the first part. I didn't know a lot of the answers and I struggled. I spent a lot of time reading the passage rather than answering the questions. I just ran out of steam. Or maybe yes to all of these. So if those sound like your experience, we're going to take a look at these top 10 strategies that I think will really rock your world and help you manage that test. So our first strategy is as follows. Always examine the entire sentence, not just the underlined part. Because if you take a look, for example, at this, they require far less pruning, fertilization, and nurturing than their hybrid counterparts. That sounds fine. Listen, I'll read that sentence again. It sounds fine. They require far less pruning, fertilization, and nurturing than their hybrid T counterparts. That sounds fine, except the sentence continues. Antiques can reportedly survive without any care from human hands. And at that point, you've got the rest of the sentence finished out, and you did not account for that in your answer. The actual sentence, and the correct answer is J, requiring. The actual sentence sounds like this. Requiring far less pruning, fertilization, and nurturing than their hybrid T counterparts, antiques can reportedly survive without any care from human hands. Well, once you read the entire sentence, you begin to see that the answer changes quite differently. So our first strategy is you can't just look at the underlined part and eyeball it. You have to figure out where that sentence starts, and it could start several lines above the underlined part or continue several lines after the underlined part. But you have got to wrap your head around the entire sentence. Deal with the entire sentence because your subject-verb agreement, your independent-dependent clauses, your phrases, your punctuation separating dependent-dependent clauses, your statements of introduction, your non-essential clauses and phrases, all of those depend upon knowing what the entire sentence is trying to say rather than just the underlined part. Let's go to number 2. Know how to spot an independent clause. This was a huge one on this practice test. And guess what? It's a huge one on every test because it wants to really drill down. Do you know how to use a comma? Do you know how to use a colon? Do you know how to use a semicolon? And the best way to figure that is if you can spot an independent clause. And by independent clause, all we mean is a complete sentence. If it's a complete sentence with a subject and a verb and there's no parts missing, you have a complete sentence, you have an independent clause. So if it's a complete sentence, it can stand all by itself. Put a period on it and be done with it, you've got an independent clause. So let's take a look at our 3 options for a comma, a semicolon, or a colon. You see in this example, let's look at the one on the screen. I knew its fate. That is an independent clause. I is the subject, knew is the predicate, and its fate is the object. So I knew its fate is an independent clause. That is perfectly fine. And then it would be ensnared just as I had been by the brilliance of these luminescent glowworms. A little bit long, but it's a complete independent clause. In fact, you could just say it would be ensnared, and that is also a complete sentence. I knew its fate, something, it would be ensnared. You are trying to connect 2 independent clauses with a simple piece of punctuation. In this case, they've given you a comma. However, commas cannot be used to separate independent clauses unless you've also got, and here we get our first example, an independent clause with a coordinating conjunction. You might have heard of coordinating conjunctions and fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Those are the 7 coordinating conjunctions. There will never be an 8th one in your lifetime. They will never remove one and leave you with only 6. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. When you have an independent clause and a coordinating conjunction followed by an independent clause, like the example here, I like cake, and that's your coordinating conjunction. That's the A in fanboys. I like cake and I like pizza. Independent clause, coordinating conjunction. Then it's fine to use a comma. No problem there. Commas can be used to separate independent clauses when there is a coordinating conjunction. Now, if you have, as we do in this example from the ACT, question number 30, independent clause plus independent clause, you can either use a semicolon or a colon. Generally, a semicolon takes 2 equally powerful sentences and puts them back to back using only the semicolon. And that's fine. I like cake. I also like pizza. Those are equally powerful sentences. Now, a colon, the only difference between a colon and a semicolon here is that I like cake, and then there's a shift in tone. I like pizza more. In other words, the 2 sentences aren't necessarily equal, but they're both independent clauses. That's fine. You can use a comma. So when we go back to our example, I knew it's fate, colon, and, no, because if you put the word and in there, it suddenly becomes not an independent clause anymore. So you can't use colon and. I knew it's fate, colon. Oh, that would work just fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But let's check J. I knew it's fate. It would be ensnared with no punctuation at all. That is not an acceptable option. So answer H is your correct answer because it follows this pattern right here. I like cake. I like pizza more, with a colon separating the 2 is like, I knew it's fate, colon, it would be ensnared. Now, down here, you see some wrong answers. I like cake, comma, and also like pizza. Well, you've got the comma and the coordinating conjunction, but also like pizza is not an independent clause. I like cake, semicolon, and also like pizza. You do not need the semicolon if you're using a coordinating conjunction, especially if what follows is not an independent clause. I like cake, semicolon, but, coordinating conjunction, comma, I like pizza more. Nope, the but is when you use a subjunctive adverb or the coordinating adverb, or there's another name to them. They're like words like however. Notice that but is one of these fanboys. However is a subordinating adjective, all right? So I like cake, semicolon, however, comma, I like pizza more. That's fine. But down in this example, I like cake, semicolon, but, well, but is too weak. But is a coordinating conjunction. It's not a subjunctive adverb. So you can't use but here, but you could say I like cake, semicolon, however, comma, I like pizza more, and that would be fine. Now, all of that, I know I went deep into the weeds in that, but what you just need to know is if you can spot an independent clause, then you can figure out real fast whether or not you would use some punctuation to connect it to another independent clause. All right, so that's it for number 2. Let's go to number 3. Excuse me. Sorry, know how to spot a non-essential phrase. Number 1 was the most missed question out of all of them on the English test a couple of weeks ago. 17% of Latham West students got it right. So we're going to drill down, and it is tricky. Listen, normally you set off non-essential phrases with 2 commas. So if I said, my friends, Jim and Sue got married, you have a non-essential phrase. It's not essential because you could do without it. My friends got married. Perfectly good sentence. If you're going to add information, my friends, comma, Jim and Sue, comma, got married, you use commas to set aside or set off non-essential phrases. Here's the problem. In question number 1, in 1948, comma, graduate students, comma, Norman Woodland and Bernard Silver, comma, took on a problem that had troubled retailers for years. The problem is, it does look grammatically like the example I gave here below. The problem is, in 1948, graduate students took on a problem that had troubled retailers for years isn't quite non-essential. You need their names because Now, if you said in 1948, Harvard graduate students took on a problem, in 1988, graduate students from Minnesota took on a problem, in 1948, graduate students Norman Woodland and Bernard Silver took on a problem. In other words, graduate students is too weak of a descriptor. You need some sort of like, well, what kind of grad? You need a detail about the graduate students because you've got to, otherwise it just sounds like graduate students, like all of them, they all decided to, like, there needs to be some sort of specifier. So number one, the correct answer is actually just going to be A, no change. In 1948, comma, graduate students Norman Woodland and Bernard Silver took on a problem. And I know that's a tough one, but if you can spot a non-essential phrase, you can set it off with commas. If it becomes an essential phrase, in other words, it really is needed in the sentence, as it is here for number one, then you do not use commas. Number four, read out loud silently. Now, I know this doesn't make sense, but hear me out. This is a really good strategy for keeping you motivated and keeping you going. One of the things that you can do while you're taking the test without making any noise is actually making the sound or making the movement with your mouth without making noise. I know this sounds strange, but if I'm reading this example, I'm saying, watch the screen, watch my little video portion of this. Okay. I'm mouthing the words. I understand that you feel silly. I know that you look stupid, but you don't actually look stupid. Nobody's looking at you. The truth is that by doing that, you keep yourself going, you keep yourself engaged. If everything is mental and you're not doing something, you stand a track to get off track. If you can at least do something while you're reading, it keeps you engaged with the text. So don't be afraid to like actually move your mouth to keep pace and keep going. All right, that's strategy number four. Number five, the ACT loves as few words as possible. Whenever you have an answer where you think, I'm not sure there's a mistake here, I think they're just wanting me to rewrite this sentence, I can almost always guarantee you that as long as it is grammatically accurate, the shortest answer is going to be the correct answer. So let's take a look at these three examples. The winning piece was a basket, comma, 18 inches tall. There's nothing wrong with that. J is the correct answer. 900 years ago, Emperor Zhejiang of China ordered the design and construction of a clock built to keep time more accurately than other clocks. The answer is J, more accurate than any other. Notice you're deleting it. You've got the fewest words. Notice this is the answer choice with the fewest words. Or how about this one? With inlaid on birch bark, as far as lids go, I wouldn't say that's basic. That's the correct answer, bark. They want you to take out all of this. So when you're trying to rewrite sentences, now there could be a grammatical mistake, there could be a punctuation error. I'm not saying that the questions are easy to spot, but as soon as you figure out this is just a wording question, how do they want me to reword this sentence? It's almost always the shortest possible option, as long as it's still grammatically correct. From time to time, you'll run into an answer that it is not grammatically correct, even though it has the fewest words. So you can't necessarily just choose the shortest one, although I'll be honest with you, if you figure out that it is an efficiency question and a wording question, and you just roll the dice, I'd say pick the shortest one. If you're running low on time, pick the shortest one and move on with your life. Speaking of moving on, let's go to number 6. Don't be afraid of big questions. Oh my lordy, oh my lordy, oh my lordy. If these things scare you, this 4 in a box, this questions 14 and 15 ask it, paragraph 3, and oh my gosh, if you just scared that and got scared of that and read it, here's the deal. Those big questions are really easy. The problem is they do take time. So when you get a big chunky question about how should we move this entire paragraph, or the author's considering omitting all of it, when you get to a question that's going to take some time, at least have a little bit of confidence that the right answer is going to be staring you in the face and you're going to know the right answer pretty easily. So, that question about do I use a semicolon or a colon, it may take you only 5 seconds to realize you don't have a clue what the answer is. But it's an easy question if you know what you're doing. These questions, they suck up a lot of your time, but the right answer is usually fairly obvious. If you just kind of walk it through, you can figure out pretty quickly what the answer is. But understandably, if you know you're short on time, these big questions do suck up some time and they do take a little bit of effort. So you may have to factor that into whether you even answer it if you know that there's going to be some that you don't get to answer because you're running behind. All right, speaking of running behind, let's go to number 7. Are you a skipper? Skippers versus non-skippers. So here's the deal. You have got to decide before you show up to the ACT test, and you have got to base it on some practice tests. Are you the sort of cat who thinks they should be skipping the tough questions and coming back to them later? Some of you watching this video will say to yourself, no, I'm sorry. If I start skipping questions, I will be all over the place. I will skip every question. I will just get to, and I will have blanks and I will have unanswered questions. I will make a mess of my answer sheet. My head will be all over the place. I can't do that. And that is 100% fine. I am great if you say, I am not a skipper. I need to start at question 1 and I need to work as diligently as I can until I hit 75. Maybe I skip 1 or 2, but even that's not comfortable. I'm just not going to be a skipper. That's fine. Don't use this strategy. But if you can be a skipper, there is a strategy that says you grab that low-hanging fruit first. You plow through that test about 3 times. Pass number 1, you get all the low-hanging fruit. Yes, if I spend 10 seconds, I'll get the right answer. Yes, if I spend 5 seconds, I know it or I don't know it. I can spend 15 seconds here. It'll take me just a second to figure out the answer. Those are all fine. And then you get to question 75, and maybe you come back to the beginning and you say, okay, my first one's number 5. I still don't want to answer that. I'm going to go to number 18. Okay, that one. All right. You see what I'm doing is I get the low-hanging fruit. I make it to 75 and I come back and I repeat that cycle and I just look at my answer sheet, what I need to answer next. All right. Notice that I've added some annotations here. If you are a skipper, you probably need to be annotating your written booklet so that you can see at a glance as you turn the pages through the 5 passages, which questions you've answered, big X through it, which questions you want to come back to it, big circle through it, and which questions you needed to come back to but have answered, circle it with an X through it. I don't care what annotation you use as long as you are consistent and you know what to look for. If you're going to make a full pass of 75 questions to get the low-hanging fruit, the easy ones, the ones that don't take that much time, and then cycle back and go through it starting over at number 1 and jump to the question you have not yet answered, that's fine. But you probably ought to know in advance what your strategy is. Okay, speaking of, this one's going to take a second and just kind of like pause what you're doing and listen to this strategy because it's different and it either will rock your world or you will decide, no, I'm not. There's no way I'm going to do that. But I want you to think this one through. You know that you have 40 minutes for the test. And if you, through a series of practice tests, know your comfortable pace, it may make sense to take literally your first 15 seconds. So when the test proctor says begin, the first thing you do is you jump to some benchmark questions and write some times. Now, here's what I mean by that. Let's take a look at the example. Let's say 8:12 is your start time. Look at my screen. I'm making some highlights. At 8:12, the proctor of the ACT test says go. And if you want to pace yourself 20 seconds per question, go to passage 1, that's question 15, and write 8:17. Go to question 30, that's the end of passage 2, and write 8:22. Go to the end of passage 3, that's question 45, and write 8:27. Notice this is 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes after each passage. So what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to spend 5 minutes on each of the 5 passages. All right, that's 25 minutes to catch all the low-hanging fruit. But the interesting thing about the strategy is when you get to the start of passage 4, it should be 8:37. When you get to this end of passage 5, it should be 8:42. You can look at the clock on the wall and see if you are on pace. So in other words, the strategy involves you before the test begin saying, I'm going to give myself 7 minutes per passage or 5 minutes per passage or 10 minutes per passage. Although, yeah, don't do 10 minutes per passage. Whatever amount of time it is, you decide how much time you want to allocate for each passage and then do the math. You have to have this figured out before you start the test. My God, do not spend 5 minutes doing computational math of chronology and all that. But what I'm saying is, if you know that you want to spend 5 minutes per passage, mark that based on your start time. So if 8:12 is your start time, 8:17, 8:22, 8:27, 8:32, 8:37, and flip through, and after each passage, write the time. When you get to that passage, check what you should do or where you should be with the time on the wall, all right, or your watch or whatever you're allowed to use time. What this does is it allows you to know, am I working ahead of schedule or behind schedule? Now, if you're not a skipper, maybe you do 30 seconds per question and you write 8:22 after question number 20, 8:32 after question 40, 8:42 after question 60, and 8:47 after question 75. It doesn't matter whether you use my numbers or my times. The whole basis of the strategy is figuring out where you want to be time-wise at various points in the actual test booklet, and taking the first 15 seconds of the test to turn a couple pages, write a time, turn a couple pages, write a time, turn a couple pages, write a time, then go back and start the test. And then when you get to somewhere where you've written a time, compare it to what the clock says on the wall, and you'll know if you're ahead or behind. That strategy will allow you to, if you can keep pace with yourself, that strategy allows you to go in and actually have some time at the very end. All right. So if you got that, great. If not, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I think it's a fantastic strategy for like high-level testers who definitely want to pace themselves and think that that would be helpful. Number 9, take a practice test with trial and error strategies. Here's the deal. You don't get to walk into the real ACT and say, well, I'm not sure where it really works, but some of those things that old Dr. Anderson said, boy, that sounds like some good ideas. So I think I'll try that during the real test. Okay, here's the deal. You can do that, but I wouldn't put any sort of weight behind your score. Some of these strategies may be a horrible idea for you as a test taker. So I would not recommend you try this stuff on the actual ACT. I would 100% suggest you try this stuff on several practice tests. Give yourself 40 minutes. See how you do. There's a million practice tests out there, 75 questions. You just sit at home with a little 40-minute timer and hit go and see how you do. Try all of these strategies. Pick the ones you want. Those are the ones you bring to the actual test day. So know it works, know it doesn't work, know it because you've tried it successfully. Don't bring any horrible test strategies into the room that you haven't tried, because they could make your score worse. All right, are you ready for number 10? Oh, you're gonna love number 10. Number 10, do all of those wellness things we keep telling you to do. They make a huge difference on your test. Look, let's not beat around the bush. 8 a.m., often on a Saturday, or sometimes on a Wednesday when all the seniors are gone and you had to show up at 7:45 and you're grouchy about it. That's not your best time to take a test, but you can't change that and I can't change that. So how are we going to get you with a pencil in hand at 8:01 ready to take a 75 question test? Well, here's how we do that. You actually have to get a good night's sleep. You ought to eat breakfast. You need to leave time for trains and locked doors and rooms in a building you can't find. You know, if you're taking the test at Olathe East and they tell you you're in room 312, well, here's the deal. It might take you an extra 7 minutes because you couldn't find room 312 easily. And maybe they have signs, maybe they don't, but don't leave that chance. I would rather have you there at 7:30 because you left extra time than have you there at 7:59 and you never recover from that sense of rush and urgency and I'm going to be late and panic. That panic doesn't go away easily. If you show up with only 30 seconds to remain and you had to hustle because every train and every door you tried from the parking lot was locked and you couldn't find room 312 and you barely got there, you will not lose that sense of, oh my God, I'm screwing up. Oh my God, I'm screwed. Like that will just stay with you and it will embed itself in your answers. So here's the deal. 8 o'clock on Saturday is early. 7:30 is even earlier. Shoot for 7:30. Shoot for 7:15. You know yourself well enough. Assume you will hit the train. Assume the first 2 doors you try from the parking lot will be locked, and assume you're going to have some trouble finding your testing room. So leave yourself extra time. Pack your testing items the night before you leave and put them with your keys. If you need a calculator, if you need a school ID, if you need your driver's license, whatever you think you need, put it next to your car keys the night before. That way, when you're leaving the house the next morning, you can make sure that you bring everything with you. The last thing you want to do is show up without the calculator, or certainly without your ID. That would be bad. If it's a thing you think would be helpful, jog or walk around the block to wake yourself up. I get it. That doesn't sound good, especially on a February morning. But here's the deal. If you think your mind would be just 1% more alert and awake, if you just walked around the block before you took a shower, or walked around the block before you got ready, or walked around the block before you hopped in your car, then by all means do that. You know your body well enough. If you are a mover and a shaker, you might need to do some moving and shaking before you walk into the test. Next, protect yourself from unnecessary drama. Man, I have been doing this game for 25 years, and I love teenagers, but it doesn't take very much for you to get sideways with life because somebody sent you a text message, or you had to check your Instagram, social, Snapchat, whatever. And I may not know what these media things are, but I'll tell you what, I sure as heck know this. It does not take all but one message from that mortal enemy, or from that girl who you thought was your friend, or from that crush who is letting you down. Like, it doesn't take anything to derail you, especially on a Saturday morning on test day. So here's the deal. I would just tell yourself, look, I'm not even going to go near anything that could create some unnecessary drama for me, because if I get a message from that one girl, or I get a message from that one boy, it is just going to set me off, and I will not be able to focus on the test. So don't open that Pandora's box. Don't open that door if you know that checking your social media has even the 1% chance of derailing your morning, and we never recover. All right. Next, write yourself notes of encouragement for your mirror, dresser, steering wheel, whatever. Those actually help. They help when you write them, they help when you stick them up, and they sure as heck help when you see them the next morning. Don't be afraid to do that. Here's another one. Listen, if you're angry that your parents signed you up for that ACT test, get revenge. Say, look, I'm going to go take this ACT test because you told me to. And it's the 12th time you're making me take it, blah, 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 whatever. But if they made you take it, make them, or have them, or listen, even if you wanted to take it, even if they didn't sign you up, whatever, ask a parent or a loved one to write you a note of encouragement, a paragraph, 3 sentences, 6 pages. Put it in a sealed envelope, take it with you, and before you walk into that testing room, unseal it and read it. It will lift your spirits, and you will feel like you're on top of the world. Get a cheerleader to do a little bit of cheerleading for you just before you walk in the room. Every parent, every grandparent, every family member, every foster parent, every neighbor, every good church person, any adult in your life who cares about you would be more than happy to write a sort of note of encouragement. And by God, if you are my student and you are my class, let me be the one to write it for you. I'm happy to do that. All right. And then finally, just figure out everything that helps or hurts your chances of doing well and make it happen. You know yourself. Maybe this list is just crap and there's not a thing on this list that you think will help you. Fine. Figure out what does help you. Walk toward the things that help you. Walk away from the nonsense that's going to make what testing day worse. You know yourself well enough. Stop and spend a few minutes to think, what's going to help me be the best test taker I can? And if you can figure that out, I think you're going to see a much better score than you might have seen on the practice test. All right, folks, that's it. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week.